call this meeting to order. The first order of business is the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, the first order of business tonight is to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next order of business, recommend amend the approvals of the minutes of the February 15th, 2020 council meeting. Everybody have a chance to read those minutes? Any corrections? Additions? Give a recommendation, please.
Recommendation to approve the minutes from 2:15 of 22.
I'll second that.
The recommendation and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Recommend approval of list of claims for February 2022. Any questions on any of the claims?
Recommendation to approve the claims for February of 2022.
I'll second.
We have a recommendation and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. To review the account balances and disbursement ledgers and financial statements for the general water sewer funds for February 28th. Give recommendation to table that. We have a chance to.
Second.
We have a recommendation and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. We have a recommendation to approve the resolution 2022-02 establishing precincts and polling places for the following redistricting. Actually, if you looked at your redistricting, there has been really no change in redistricting, so. Motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. To recommend approval of resolution 2022-03 establishing participation in the advisory committee as part of possibility participating in a joint powers agreement for the ambulance taxing district. For the audience, we had conversations with both the county and the city of International Falls in forming an ambulance district that was proposed by the city of International Falls to help make up some of the deficit in their operations of their ambulance services to our area. Technically, nobody has agreed to join the ambulance district. What we're trying to do with this resolution is to form a steering committee to see if there's validation to move this thing forward or not, and it's rather than be meeting with county boards and city boards and everything. So we come to the resolution that we'd appoint 2 people from the county, and a couple from Ranier, and a couple from International Falls to try to form a steering committee to see if we can bring some light on this subject and try to keep it moving ahead, or see if it has merit enough to move ahead. And with that said, we kind of come to that agreement, and I'm bringing it in front of the council right now. I think all our council members there, Wilbur was there by Zoom, and obviously ambulance service is an important part of our infrastructure up here, and the ambulance service obviously is still going to exist. We're not going to do without it, and we have that option. It's just basically we're there to figure out if we can help the city, or if we're obligated to in any which way to help the city with their issue with their ambulance service. So I think it's a good deal that we look at this steering committee and see if they've come up with some any better ideas of managing it, or whatever we can do to help. I think it's important that we keep this and keep that communication open. And if a district is decided to be formed, what it's going to cost everybody, and how it's going to be managed, and who's going to be on the board, and things like that. So there's important questions if there's one established. I know there's some other stuff. So I think it's important that we're there representing ourselves, if nothing else other than that. So with that, I'd like to recommend that we do this and present a couple of people to form a steering committee.
I'll second.
Do you, well, with that, Mayor, I'd like their wording to change because they have in their wording only one representative from Ranier, and we discussed two. So I would like them to come back with the proper language and paperwork before I approve it.
Well, that would be the agreement. This is just a steering committee to adjust questions just like that. And, again, the representation on the board, the amount of taxation, if there would be, and how it would formula, and all those things. The committee would look at that and see if it's reasonable or something. And if we found things that weren't reasonable, we do have the option of not joining the taxing district. So that's never going to take it away from us. But I think we have a duty to try to help them get through this and see if they can find some.
And who would you want to be the two representatives?
Well, I'm pretty familiar with that, and I got a pretty good handle on what we can do that. So I would recommend that. I think I would recommend myself, and I wouldn't mind if Mike Welcome would want to join that committee. Again, I just would question that. Otherwise, I'm sure one of the councilmen will be there.
If one of the council members would like to, that'll be fine. If not, I'd gladly volunteer.
I'll just make a recommendation. We recommend Mike Wilson as well.
Okay? Well, there you go.
I'd like to make...
Well, thank you, Mike. I mean, you were familiar with that, and you asked some good questions. And again, I always like to see, obviously, other council, and I appreciate all the participation that they give us in these committees and that. But it's always nice to see somebody from the audience and from the community, other than a councilman. So it's like saying that almost a third representation out there. So I really do appreciate that. So with that said, I think we will make recommendation that we will join in and to form a steering committee with myself and my welcome as our representatives.
I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on. It's to recommend approval of a letter of support to the Northland Foundation for the D Main Street Economic Revitalization Program. What that is, folks, is because of, again, this COVID, I guess it gets credit for everything, but there's some funds that are going to be dedicated to the DEED program, and so they want it dedicated to the DEED program so that there's funds available that you would have to apply for revitalization of businesses on Main Street, that's what they call it. And if you wanted a new siding or something, there's DEED funds that you can apply for. Obviously, they're just trying to put that together and all of that.
So there's not even a Ranier business listed on King Street. There's not a Ranier business listed on this. Nobody applied? Wow.
Well, I'm not so sure they even knew about it. So once the area, I think think if it's funded, I think you can apply, I'm sure they have. Cheryl, do you know if the application is still open for that, if someone chose to apply for these funds?
I think it's closed, but I'm not confident. It's KEDA and Small Business Development are working on this whole program. And they have the information out. And
Well, again, then if the applications for this fund is closed, it's probably something that will exist again next year. But even though we have nobody in Ranier apply for any of that funding, there is funding available. We get, I imagine, businesses, international calls in some other areas.
So this is like the PPE program?
Yeah, similar. It's all, again, it's another funding mechanism for some of those quote relief dollars that are out there. And they're asking for us to support it. If you don't feel that we have anybody in the program, I don't think we have to support it, or we don't have to, obviously you don't have to be against it, but it's still letter of support is all they were asking. And since we don't have anybody in it, I don't know if that means anything or not to anybody.
I'll go ahead and recommend that we approve it just for support.
I'll second that.
We have a recommendation, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Again, Jen, that's liquor store operating statement for February. Another good month, I see.
Yes,
I don't know how it goes.
and March is off to a great start too, so,
March started off, would you say?
yes.
I see a lot of snowmobiles are still parked there. I noticed this year maybe more than not, it's probably because of the snow, but I've noticed quite a bit of snowmobile traffic that is, not just last week or the week before, but it seems like more continual business. What do you have planned for next month?
For next month, this month we have a cribbage tournament on Sunday, and then we'll have a DJ for the St. Patrick's Day weekend, and then just hoping that we still get those snowmobilers in because it's been crazy on weekends with them.
Isn't there the Kerry Park hockey tournament's coming too, isn't it?
That's that St. Patrick's weekend.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Is it? Okay, because that's usually
a big one.
I know I see the bar, I remember years ago, they used to even help me bartend some of the clients.
Oh, yes.
So, okay, well, I guess mechanically, everything working good over there so far?
We did have a little hiccup with one of the coolers, but we took care of that, and the parts came in today, and it's up and running again, so there'll be a little fee on that, but at least it's up and running, so.
I think I mentioned to you, if you got a program, have you looked at the KCDA, you were looking at some funding or something, have you decided what you're looking for, what the ask is?
I do have an idea. At the end of next month, I am going to go to a conference, and the lady that I had mentioned before that's really good with helping municipalities with grants, I'm going to go talk to her and have her sit down with me and see what she can do too to help out with that.
But how about the KCDA, that's a separate grant if you have a cooler project, air conditioning.
Right.
Tile.
I have been in contact, but I haven't got any information yet.
Well, when you have a project, that's just another funding mechanism that's been good and helped us. So, any other questions for Jim?
Thanks.
I mean, we had a great last year, and you're looking like you're about double that right now, so just keep it up, hopefully it keeps going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give a recommendation on the report.
I'll make a recommendation that we accept the liquor store operating statement.
We have a recommendation and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Nick? Maintenance.
Yep.
I heard you were following the skate rink on Sunday morning after you got back to make sure the party went well.
Yeah.
I was over town, how did the party go?
It's good. I think they have about 100 some kids. Turned out pretty good.
Very. Okay, snow for sledding,
I cooked up
ice for skating.
80 hot dogs.
What else? How much?
80.
80 hot dogs. That's pretty good.
That's
A
great.
lot of wieners.
Any other issues here, Nick?
We did have a water break
Yeah, we did.
right before I left for St. Cloud for that 4-day conference. We had a water break
Or was break up?
down on 20, right across from Bruce Early's house.
Okay.
It was two service corps that got pulled off the main in the same spot.
From frost or how did they?
A little over 7 foot of frost in the roadway. And the service corps ran up 5 feet and then down into the main. They just popped them off there.
I was thinking this year, frost is probably, we're just probably starting to get into that with the snow blows. We're probably going to be experiencing more of that same situation. And that's so.
We've been slowly picking away at our manhole covers and that, getting them cleared up as much as we can. So when this stuff starts to thaw and go, it's got a place to go.
One thing Nick mentioned prior to the meeting here, we had some discussion. When we purchased the ASB, there was a lawnmower lawnmower for the front of it that was purchased too. And that particular one had 2 different blades on it, which gave you a better mowing application rather than a brush mower. It gives you a better finish on the grass. But apparently there were some switches or something, but I mentioned to Nick to make sure he takes that in. And they haven't used it, well, ever since Nick's been here, and prior to that, nobody was using it. Well, I couldn't understand why not, because those things are very...
Yeah, I don't think it was used for at least a year.
That's why we bought it, but apparently there was something wrong with it, nobody bothered to get it fixed. So see if you can get it, make sure it works, because that'll save you a ton of...
Yep.
And actually, you mentioned about... I know you got a lot of snow, but I'm going to take a chance of you taking those tracks down. You have the shops available. If you want to wait a week or two, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we get past this next week here, and then we should be good. We can put the new ones on.
One thing we may want to consider in the future in purchasing, and I'm thinking about that, it'd be a good dump trailer that you could... A couple things, you could haul gravel in it, for the small areas you need, although we call something to pick up a dump trailer also. When you got a tree to remove, you take the tree down, you got some way of getting rid of it. And also, if you have to haul the ASD around, if you have to take it somewhere, you have a
Even
they're about $7,000-8,000, I'm guessing.
even fueling that thing up, we have to drive it to one stop every time down that blacktop. Every time they fuel it up. Nothing takes a lot of fuel.
You can't fill it up with just a gas.
Well, if you want to make 20 trips there, 5-gallon jerry cans.
Well, there's a lot of applications I know where, you get big potholes and you need gravel filled in and things like that, or even just hauling wood over to the skate rink and things like that. So, as you know, once you get a trailer, you use it a lot. So that's something we'll just consider later in the budget here and see what we get some good things, maybe possibly after May, there may be some additional funding coming this way through the LGA, so we'll be looking at ways of utilizing that, I'm sure, if we get some, so.
Yep.
Anything else from there?
Just keep doing
All right.
John York.
Okay. Thank you.
Soil and water, Jason.
Hello, Mayor, City Council. We just wanted to come and give you guys an update on some things that we're doing in the city, in the vicinity. I'm sure Cheryl's made you aware that we were successful with the DNR's EAB grant, so that was excellent news. That grant does not require a city match, so that's just $25,000 that we can use to implement EAB mitigation for the city. Did you?
Excuse me, you said that we have a grant for $25,000 for the tree replacement?
Correct. Yep. So I assisted with the writing of that. When we did it, we kind of shot for the moon with 121,000 proposed. We're pretty sure we weren't going to get that, but that was the ask. And they came back with 25, which is the percentage, that's the ratio that they're giving pretty much for communities. So International Falls got one at actually a little bit lesser ratio, percentage of their ask. So the next steps are kind of correcting that grant to reflect the 25,000 rather than the 121. There are some things that we need to get done. This will be, so instead of getting the whole project done in one shot, this will probably be a reoccurring grant cycle, like every 2 years, or this is a 3-year grant. Every 3 years there'll be a new grant application, and it'll just become kind of a long-term reapplication and a little more money at a time.
So it's not just, the 25,000 is for this year, and actually for, if I remember right,
3 years.
to be used over 3 years.
3 years.
But next year, there may be another grant for
3 years.
another 3 years.
Yep.
So it's,
So after 3 years, there'll be another grant opportunity.
so after 3 years, there may be
Yeah.
another grant out. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Somewhat perpetuating it is what you think may happen.
right, that's typically how they do these natural resource grants, because, they want to keep us engaged rather than one big influx of money and then,
Now, in that grant application, I just read through that, and there was one question on that. They would buy us a stump grinder, and but they will not pay for in-kind services. So in other words, or wages for in-kind services. In other words, if Nick were to, if we were to go ahead and add the stump grinder to, this is for clarification also, if we were to add the stump grinder as part of the purchase part of this program, and Nick were to grind the stumps, they would pay for the stump grinder the $3,200 or something, which it was worth. But we could not charge for Nick's wages. Is it just Nick's wages, or is it rent on the machine? Because obviously Nick's not going to do by hand.
no,
You
it's,
understand what I'm saying?
yeah, absolutely.
We
There-
can understand Nick's wages, but
Yep.
could we get reimbursed for?
There is no in-kind in this grant because there's no match. So you guys get 25,000 and there's no need to match anything. They'll pay $5,000 for equipment to the grantee, which is City of Ranier,
And that comes off to 25 then?
and that's part of the 25.
Okay.
So the estimate,
20 for trees and watering and removal.
yep, there are some things we do need to take care of, in this ongoing project with this first grant cycle, which is a tree inventory,
Yeah.
a city tree inventory, and a management plan. That stuff has to get done first before we actually get into the implementation.
These have to be approved before, and all this has to be, no work can be done before, well, work can be done, but you won't get reimbursed for work done prior to the grant being
Executed.
executed, so.
Yep, so so I'll be working with Cheryl on that revised budget to reflect that 25,000. So I just summarized basic estimates. So the DNR thought that our estimate of $2,000 for the tree inventory was too low. So they wanted us to budget 5,000. It's not to say that it's going to cost 5,000, but they thought that's a more realistic
Did you
estimate.
give us a price on that? Didn't we have a consultant to do our APM as a consultant?
Well, so you'll have to put it out on bid,
Okay,
to be fair, to allow for consultant to bid on it. Now, what we as the SWCD did say is that if you do not get a bid from a consultant that's within the budget, we are willing to put in a bid. We just don't want to compete with a private business if they have the equipment and the experience to do so. So
they're going to recommend, DNR would like to see a larger number on the proposed inventory.
Work,
And
yeah.
again, that comes out to 25,000 of actual tree plantings. So
Correct,
for the
yeah.
plan and the inventory,
So the plan is separate, and what we recommended is you can contract out for the plan, but you're probably looking for another large chunk of the grant beyond the 5,000. So what we recommended is that you do it in-house, and you can do that through the establishment of a tree board, a community tree board. So if you guys, we can make recommendations on participants, but it would typically be made up of, local stakeholders, natural resource people in the county, in the vicinity, trained arborists, and then, that tree board could write the management plan, and then, you guys could adopt it. The city council could adopt it as the EAB.
but then they'd recognize that as in-house services then, or in-kind services, that they would pay for that then? That would come out of the...
No, so this grant does not allow any billing for time.
Okay, so I don't see it making any sense, and tell me if I'm wrong. Why wouldn't we just hire a consultant? Put something in the budget, whether it's 2,000, 4,000, 5,000, whatever that number is. Go hire a consultant. That's reimbursable. The consultant is, correct? So if we do it ourselves, we don't get paid for it, so why, the same money's coming, well, we wouldn't have to put the, but if you got 4,000 or 5,000 in for the inventory, and you do have an in-house board that does it, they're not going to give you the $4,000 in the budget.
No, you have the 25,000. So it would just cost you more out of the grant to hire a consultant. Where if you did it by a voluntary tree board, establishing a voluntary tree board, that's 4,000 that you could.
Now I understand.
Yeah. And then you kind of have local input. You have, more local control. You can appoint city council members to the tree board, however you.
Would there be a defined duty of what they're supposed to do? Like, do we go to the tree board and say, take that, the tree board says we got 40 dead elms and we're going to take them down?
Yeah, the tree board is a voluntary, like a subcommittee. So it could be, this could be a long-term subcommittee for the city to make decisions on, forestry management or, city tree planning or, whatever responsibilities you guys see fit.
Well, Jen, do you feel like being a tree cop?
Absolutely.
Oh, I didn't think she would, see?
Just give her a chance.
And it's certainly not something.
I understand that, but, again, it's a committee, and again, it's, basically a 3-year commitment, because I guess you don't have to stay on here, you resign, you have to find somebody else to fill the shoe, but, a couple, 3, 4. I see normally Mr. Karati's here, but she's not here. They must be vacationing. They're being good, forester.
Yep.
So maybe we can talk. So that volunteer thing is not something that we're probably not capable of doing, but we want to certainly find the right people. And Tom would be excellent if he could.
If we could find the right people, it would be very advantageous, I think, for Ranier.
When you save the money, you do have input. So yeah, I like the idea. Again, you want to get, it's a duty. You understand? We got a grant, we got a responsibility to be responsible for that money and provide the function that's being given to us for it. So again, that'd be great if we could, like yourself, I believe you'll follow through with this, but if you're not the only one, we got a Tom Trotty would be, you know, I'm just thinking him, his name, because he's a forester.
Yep, and you'll have a few months.
Again, we'd have to, and we can, what's our time frame on this? We have time to consider the board or a
Yep.
volunteer committee?
Yep, so it sounds like, according to the last email I got, that Ben West, our local DNR contact for this, he asked the administrator of this grant down in St. Paul, and it sounded like once we get the revised budget and narrative to reflect that $25,000 down to her, it would be probably a month or more before they'd have the grant executed, because there's one person administering this grant for all of
So
Minnesota.
the next question is on the revised budget. Cheryl, that's something that you're going to work up then with yourself and Cheryl, is that?
Yep, so I just had a quick summary, just scratched it down before I came. So we got 5,000 budgeted for the inventory, and I do believe that would be a ceiling. You know,
Okay.
it may be 2,000, 3,000, you know. We got 5,000 for the stump grinder, which I think is a priority, right? And then that gives you about 15,000 at roughly, according to our estimated bids that we received, about $780 for the tree removal and replacement and 3-year maintenance. So that gives us about 20 trees.
Trees?
About 20 trees. So,
Unless we get a lower price on removing a tree.
yep, or
A small tree, you know, not an $800 tree, that's a $200 tree, so.
Yeah.
Depending on the tree, yeah.
or less money for the inventory, which will give us a few more. But I think, you know, the park would be a perfect candidate for that amount, and that gives us a good start.
Place to start, yeah.
Yep, so,
And we can contract the removal services out to whoever, if they're certified, that insurance and stuff like that.
As
So,
long as you got money left in the grant.
yep,
again, we can't do those in kind because if Nick did it, we would be reimbursed for it. Is that correct or not?
so there is no time, there is no money for staff time. But if you guys, that was one thing in the request from St. Paul, that if you get the grinder, you have to, you're obligated to do the stump grinding for this project.
So our staff would need to do that?
Yes, yep. But there is no staff time. But if they pay for the stump grinder,
Well, just to clarify, I don't get that, the stump figured out, you'll buy the stump grinder, but if we grind the stumps, we're not going to get reimbursed for it. That
Yep.
would come. But if there's a tree that we got budgeted $500 to take down, whatever that number is, if we took that down ourselves, we would not get paid the $500?
no,
Okay.
no.
So then-
But you could use it elsewhere.
Pardon me?
But you could use that money elsewhere. Like if you
Still
just,
your grant money.
yeah, it's still in your pool of money. So you could,
So we might take 10 out of 20 down.
Yep. And then you just have more money for purchasing trees or doing something else.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. Nick took the tree down, we get $500 for the tree. but
It's still in your
We
pool.
could plant 4 more. Okay, got it. The 25,000 is ours.
Yep.
If we did X amount of that, we still get the 25.
Yeah, and any in-kind, we want to capture that because that will look really good for the next round of grants. So any work that Nick does, we want to make sure that you're tracking that, those hours, and then the task, so we can use that in the next grant application. Because if we can say, you know, Nick did $3,500 worth of in-kind work on this project, you know, that's just a better chance that we'll get that next
Yeah,
round.
$25,000 grant, we put $25,000 for our own work into
Yep.
it. And then we take down trees and remove the stumps, whatever that was. And that total would come up to $25,000. But we also planted $25,000 worth of other trees, so it looks like it's a match or a
Right,
percentage of that.
and they might give you even more next time, a bigger ratio what you're at.
Because
so,
it's not required, it looks even better.
Yep.
And if we set up the tree committee, it would be advantageous.
Yeah, any work that you do towards this project is going to reflect really well.
Put that on the grant app.
Yep.
Makes it look like a really interesting.
So, and good, I did get a good understanding of that also.
Yep. And if anything comes up, shoot me an email, or I'm happy to talk to you
That's
guys
good, now I
about it.
get a pretty good understanding how we can work it.
Yep.
What we get paid for, what we don't get paid for, but what we get credit for too. Okay.
Great.
Any other questions on that? Other than the, go ahead.
We had talked about this a couple weeks ago. Did you ever get any clarification on when it says any remaining grant funds can be spent one-to-one on ash removal / replantings with corresponding supplies based on your identified needs? Did you ever figure out what exactly they meant by one-to-one?
I think they're just saying, I think that was just one-to-one, there's no match. You don't have to match, so. So the next thing I had, we have, the Soil and Water has a grant through Board of Water and Soil Resources for cooperative weed management. And we've used quite a bit, good chunk of the funding here in Ranier, doing wild parsnip spraying around on private landowner. We're offering 75% cost share for priority parcels. It's not a large grant, so we're kind of focusing on critical noxious weeds like wild parsnip and in residential areas. If we were to focus on fields or something like that, we could spend the grant out in a weekend. So we're kind of focusing on contained infestations, and the residents of Ranier have been really engaged in that.
Yeah, I think that has been brought to our attention at several meetings about the buckhorn infestation. So I can see there is a 75% cost share grant here, and we've been trying to deal with that both privately and through the city. I don't know, Nick, have you done any of the removal of that at all?
Just with the mowers. Just with the mowers, and mower up and mower.
Yeah.
But there is a, so if the county would come, is that the Soil and Water County does it for us, or they hire a contractor to do it?
So it's our grant, Soil and Water. We're not really affiliated with the county. We're our own district. So this, what we'll do is contract that work out. So this is kind of a project that we brainstormed. This is kind of a hot spot for buckthorn right in Ranier, right in the community here. So, and I think everybody that understands invasive species knows that, if that's the challenge, is if you have a lot of different ownerships in one small area, you might get a couple really engaged landowners that address the problem, and then if neighbors don't do it, it doesn't do any good. So what we kind of envisioned is a big coordinated effort, and that's what we're going to try to make happen with the remaining grant funds for the...
I see the landowners are invited to have a buckthorn removed from their properties. And I think John Brookman had brought that to our attention. I don't know if he's got any or just noticed some. But if he was to have some removed from his property, is that the Ranier grant, or is that something that he applies in to get 75% of the money back from?
So this is part of our grant. We're the grantee for this one. So this is the Board of Water and Soil Resources grant. So we're actually offering the 75% cost share. So we will handle that. This buckthorn project is going to be kind of a standalone project, and we're going to try to do the whole southern part of Ranier here. And that's that map. So we've done a lot of legwork on it already. We had to try to find a contractor that was equipped to do a large area. You can see in the map that it's about 50 acres total. What that area is, an actual forested and buckthorn infested area, it's probably closer to 15, 20 acres. But we're going to try to make a week-long project of it and treat that entire area.
So the question is, All right, it's your project. You got these 50 acres in Ground Ranier,
Yep.
and you're going to do it, but we would have to pay you $1,625 is what?
Yep, so the grant, so the way we envisioned it, instead of going from landowner to landowner, there's about 80 private parcels in that chunk. That would,
Do them all, and yeah, that was the question.
Yeah.
You don't have to bill this guy and that
yeah,
guy.
the logistics of that
He
just
gets
wouldn't.
$20, you get $20.
Yeah.
So in other words, instead of the $1,625, that would cover what you're doing
Yep.
for all
Satisfies that.
citizens in the Ranier area that have
Yep.
buffalo.
Yep, and I would love.
Not have any, but too bad.
Yeah, and I would love to have like the EAB grant where we didn't have to ask for a match, but this one requires a 25% non-state match. So we can cover 75% of the contracting costs, and then we have to come up with at 25%.
I like that idea because the thing is, if we don't have it now, we're going to continue, we'll all end up getting it.
Yep.
I guess.
And if it works out really well, so this is the last year for this CWMA grant, and I just submitted the next year, 2-year cycle on this grant. So hopefully if this pilot works out really good and we have good participation around Ranier, we will go north of the tracks and just continue and hit,
Recommendations, folks?
Make a
I
recommendation.
have a question.
Mhm.
Basically, what you're doing right now is you're just taking care of the center of the Ranier itself.
Yep.
You're not going as far as Second Bridge, Recovery Jamison Edition, or French Edition.
Nope.
Has anybody ever checked to see if there's buffalo?
Well, there definitely is, but we had to, with this, we'll take care of the remaining grant funds we have. So this is kind of what we have funds for. So we're gonna contract with the Conservation Corps of Minnesota to come up, bring a 6-man crew. They're well equipped. They do these projects like this all over Minnesota, and they're very reasonable. I thought for a 5 or 6-man crew for a 40-hour week with all the equipment, the travel, the expenses, $6,500. I don't think you could find.
So could Jamison and French Edition be in the next 3 years?
Absolutely, yep. We can, if this works out really well, and I think the hurdle will be, getting that landowner participation, but that's why Jolene's here. She's our
I live in
outreach.
French edition myself, actually.
Yeah, she's our outreach coordinator, and she's been really successful getting landowner participation in other grants. So, and then we welcome, that handout, it kind of talks about, partner duties, potential duties, and, we'd love to have you guys, help out as we coordinate this, so.
Any other questions for us?
To be honest with you, I don't know what a buffalo is.
Apartments. Here's one.
I'll show you.
There you go. There's some right over that way.
Yeah, I should. Effectively, you have to treat it with herbicide. Yep, there is a foliar herbicide you can apply, but just for large plants, which is kind of what we're going to be focusing on, the berry-producing plants that are actually contributing to the spread. You got to cut it, and then there's a stump application.
Which we have in our office.
You can do that in the wintertime too.
Yeah, you can take my copy of the notes, but that we're gonna shoot, it's a year-long project because we have to treat it when it's dormant. So we're gonna focus on landowner coordination in the spring and the summer. We're gonna do marking late summer. When the leaves are coming off, that's when it's easiest to identify. And then we'll be hitting it hopefully in October and November. We'll coordinate those CCM crews to come up. So,
Okay. Thoughts, recommendations? I think if we don't do it, the station, like you said, it's a $1,650 cost for the city. Basically, rent 50 acres of
money well
city for it, so pretty reasonable price. Give a recommendation.
I'll make that recommendation.
Second.
Got a recommendation and a second. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next is to follow up on the CURE project. The next steps, I know we had a real good, we had a good open house meeting here, and we went back and took a list of stuff that the steering committee had. He looked it over, and I guess we're waiting on the next steps to the, I gotta find that one. For the pier project. Well, we took the comments and everything else, we took it to the city, the steering committee then, and basically, we're at the point now is, there was some we took all the written comments we had, and some oral ones I'm sure were listened to, and gave it to the steering committee, and the steering committee, basically, I really don't know what they come up with, other than Mike, you were here. Can you fill us in on the steering committee? You guys reviewed all the...
Yeah, we did have a meeting, a virtual meeting with the engineers 2 weeks ago. And there were some questions brought up, of course, and the engineers were more or less looking for guidance on what we thought they should do. And so there was some difference of opinion on the committee what we thought we should do. Ultimately, I guess we were at the back and call of the city council, and if we were going to meet again, I think the city council would have to give us guidance on what they want us to meet on. The engineers were asking us if we thought they should progress to keep going with their plan that they've been contracted to do, and that was a lot of our discussion. There was a discussion about changing the size of the dock and the scope of the project, but ultimately, I guess it's the city's option what they would like the committee to do. I know that the city has signed a contract with them to design the dock as is. You know, we have gone over this now almost for 5 years. We've got a pretty good plan there, I think, and that's what the contract was for that dock. So my personal thoughts are that they just continue on with what they were hired to do. But we're more or less, I think, at the council's discretion on what they want. You know, it's up to you if you want us to continue looking at certain aspects of it, or if you want to tell them to keep going.
Well, I can see in the cheat sheet I got here that directly, your question is, should the engineering company continue with the design or pause until funding allocation process is complete? The funding, in talking to the bonding, our lobbyists about where the funding sits right now, actually the funding right now is setting in committees, so that won't be decided till probably the end of May as far as how much we get, if we get any, if anybody gets any. There may be some stallmates that no bonding will be issued, all that stuff goes. But as far as, I don't know where they are in the permitting processes, what kind of permitting, where they are in it and everything else. As far as this design, structurally, I think we've all come to the agreement that the bin whatever that type of construction, where that type of construction, I guess we're still at I don't know what the steering wheel going to come up with. Well, I don't think they're going to get down to the final design or final details of how this thing is exactly going to work. I think they're working still on the structural designs, processing, soil borings and things like that. I personally think the soil borings, things like that should continue because come May, obviously we do have some money they're not going to spend. They're obligated under a contract anyway, which we have money for. I don't see, once we get to continue the soil borings and some structural engineering, a final design with things like that, I don't think that is going to come into effect before May anyway. Just this way things proceed. So if there's some changes and everything necessary, I'm sure we'll have some other open houses and open meetings. Once we get some final. First of all, what's going to control this? Let's not kid ourselves. Is how much funding is going to be available. You may want a 275-foot dock, but you got monies for 250 or 225. And again, even though we get allocation for a certain amount, once you let the contracts may come back that are 10% higher. So again, you have to make those adjustments if you're trying to do the budget to your thing. So to try to, I think we continue the design process. When I say design process, the soil borings, things like that, stuff that it still can be changed, but without, and again, that'll all be depending on, again, funding and again, open meetings, if, we decide we want to do instead of red, those things can happen if you want 20 feet wide or 18 feet wide or things like that.
Also, you got to look at it this way here. If they go out there and do the boring samples out there, and they go up 281 feet, and there's nothing but muck, they're not going to be able to put those in there. They can.
Yeah.
Did they do the borings? Did you guys hear? Because I know there was issues with getting the borings done, and then they were concerned about the ice.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any activity down there. As far as your comment there, actually they want, if there's 20 feet of muck there, they're happy with it. Their concern is
They need
better
at least
off
10
to
feet.
shovel. But the other thing I think the council and the engineers have to keep in mind too is, and we've been hearing this for years all over the country, is all these grants are come available and they're looking for a shovel-ready project. Well, to get the engineering process done and get the permitting process done,
yes,
that makes this a shovel-ready project that actually puts us out there ahead of us.
Totally understood. So between now and May, I'm sure there's projects that part of this can be, they can continue working on this again. I don't see no reason to stop, but I mean, that part is funded with a contract with them. But this is probably the worst time of year, other than some schematics and yourself, other than some industrial drawings. Again, I don't see no reason to stop anything and proceed so that, we're funding for what we think is the maximum size of this project, the maximum what we think on preliminary estimates that would cost. Again, who knows where inflation might be, but if we have to make them adjustments, you can always go down. It's hard to go up.
And that's true. The way this dock is designed, it's designed to a certain size, but it's pretty much just repetition on how this is built. So it's pretty easy to change some things if we have to. Like you said, we want to change the width on something. I think that's fairly simple to do, but I think the key is just to get that process, keep it moving.
No, I totally agree because, like you say, it's a really fairly simple design, but, if it's a repetitious design and if it has to be 2 feet narrow, well, instead of, the cost estimate for precast concrete, 18 feet wide is 10% less than 20 feet, so they'll be able to make those adjustments. And what's going to do that is the funding and public comment on this. We've had one meeting, it went real well, but we want to see now, hopefully they can come back with a little more insight. I don't know what I don't know what you guys talked about everything, I know there's low lights and things like that, so maybe come back with a little better, more conceptual drawing for us and things like that based on whatever you guys do.
So what I think is, of course, we'll do whatever the council wishes us to do, whatever decision that is. I do know one of the things that we probably want to take a look at as a committee, and we'll have to send a letter out or emails up and discuss it a little bit and get together. But the amenities that we're going to have on the dock, our goal has always been that this doesn't cost the taxpayers in Ranier a dime, now or in the future. And one way we see that happening is to offer these amenities, but we also charge for these amenities, such as water, power, and sewer pump outs. And so I think my personal thoughts as a committee member is that's one of our next steps. We need to start investigating that. We don't need to hire an engineer to do that. I think we can do that ourselves. We have really good resources that we can tap into. And we need to kind of figure that out, and we can come up with some preliminary costs and projections on what maybe we can make off of those things. So I think as a committee that might be one of the things that we want to look at. Like I've always said, we're at the beck and call, whatever the council wishes, that's what we do.
Well, I think we just keep moving forward, and the idea right from the start on this is, one, we have the open meetings so people understand what we're trying to do. And second of all, we purposely told them to make sure to componentize this because of the funding issue, whether we can afford electrical package on it per se, or a sewer pump system. Those are things, if the budget comes in different, we can make them adjustments. Don't mean that we have to stop everything and wait and see how much money we got. They certainly can drive, but because eventually I can see if this project goes and we decide on the color size and all those things, to get them all behind us, and we have enough money for the electrical, and nothing says 2 years from now we're not going to be applying for electrical package, and obviously they'll have to have and it's one of those things. So yeah, I think it's just be nonsense not to just keep proceeding with this. And we got the bill written up, not the bill, but the request written up, so we continue to try to get that money in what we do. Yeah, Jen.
Well, as I understood it, for those who have been on the committee longer than me, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think in order to go through the permitting process, your design has to be complete and submitted. So you have to be decided on the design that you want before you can complete or start the permitting process. So I think what the engineers were saying at the meeting was that, well, do you think it's wise to submit this design that we want for this permitting process before we know what our funding is going to be? And I took the position that it would be wise to not go forward with the permitting yet, because why would we go forward with the permitting? It's a long, arduous process with these entities before we know what money we will have. Like, it would make more sense to know the funding that we have so that we know what we can design next if it has to be done in parts. And correct me if my thinking is not proper, but it's just, as it was explained to me during the follow-up Zoom meeting that the committee had, was that the funding wouldn't be given or decided until May, so why would we start the permitting process on a pure project that we don't know we have the money for yet?
My thoughts would be on that would be maybe a little bit different than yours. We have a pretty good idea of what we're going to do, a key dock out there with the maximum size already. Nobody's said we're going to build one 500 feet or anything. So if we permit or design and put a design out there and a request for the money to build this type of project, you can always scale back. The permit, I don't think would be very hard to change.
But do we know that for sure? Do we know what is necessary?
Yeah, the permit, what you'd be doing is putting the same application in, and all of a sudden they would be, okay, whether they're going to approve a 275-foot dock or a 250-foot dock, if you got design and permitted to put a 275-foot dock in, and a simple notation of the permit that we decided to build at 250 feet.
But does that set us back to the permitting process, what I'm
I
saying?
don't think it would set it
So
back.
it's not like, well, now you have to go back to the starting line with this new, and now you have
Yeah,
this 2
I-
to 4 week wait period for, and I'm ignorant on that, on that whole process, and that's why if somebody knows,
Yeah, I don't think it would set you back one iota, because I don't know how soon we would get the permit, but if we were to permit
he said
process.
they say it's supposed to happen over 3 to 6 months.
How long did he question, how long for the permit?
I'm not sure how long.
It's like September.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, I'm not sure. For some reason, I'm thinking he was talking about September by the time they had, once, they went through this whole process, finalized the design, got the permitting, that they would have everything would be in place by September.
Oh, well, that wouldn't, like I said, then the
Yeah.
permit process, whether it's delayed or not delayed, wouldn't be the hill of beans. So I continue on with the design and continue on with the permit process, because if we have to, by then we'll know how much money, or relatively how much money we should be getting. We still won't have the contractor's price, but we would have, say we get the full 2.1 million, and we got a permit for a 275-foot dock. After we have our meetings and we have all our others, whatever else we have, or considerations of any type, if we have to alter that permit, we're not expecting to get it till September anyway. I thought if the permit was going to come in prior to May, when the funding's available, that may be something different. But if we're in the process of filling out an application or permit process, and it's not going to be, certified out with all the stuff until September, I don't see no issue with that.
I'm sure Cheryl would make a call tomorrow to the engineers and ask them if there's an issue with that permitting process. If we decided we want to make something happen, we get the funding, we want to make it smaller, right? I've never really heard that before, and I don't know what you probably know to Dennis, but any job I've ever done, you get a permit to build X, and if you're building smaller, there's never really an issue with it, but it's always an issue if you want to go bigger, for sure.
Well, that was my understanding too, was that wasn't part of the question about that, like, do we go for a permit for the full scope of the project? And, I think that was, to me, that was the center of gravity, that was the question that the engineer was asking, well, how do we proceed? Do we proceed with the design as is, or do we look at you guys deciding about something smaller? And I agree, I think scope it large, and then, I've never seen a project where they said, oh, you're going to do it smaller, let's relook this.
Yeah, you would, again, and I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, the permit application will be for X amount of a dock, and that won't be certified till well after the funding's available. So if we find out the funding's available and it's only half of that, well, it's certainly going to say you change 75 to 50 to 25, whatever that number happens to be, and but you want to keep the process moving. I know that, but once it stalls, it just seems then everything gets jeopardized. I don't know why.
I don't think it'd be jeopardized over 2 months of waiting. I don't think our project would be jeopardized over
What are we waiting for?
I think it'd be smart to know what money you're working with before you go forward. I think knowing that, I think any project knowing what your funding is helpful in deciding where you're going when it
Well,
comes to.
certainly, but I think that's our biggest consideration. But whether we are doing the soil borings or whether we decide to go in, I don't see where we're wasting any money doing anything.
No, I think, but the boring is part of the phase 1 and phase 2 that is included in the project that SEH is doing for us right now. They would not do those. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I
I'm
wouldn't.
not asking to not do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I know. Well, again, that's what I'm saying. All I can see is in the design phase of this, I don't see us changing anything as far as structural. Get me wrong, whether it's structural design is bin construction, basically bins and the precast concrete on top, whether we have high, tall lights or small lights, okay. But I don't, again, whether they start drawing in electrical units that, can be separated, and that, I don't see, and that's exactly what we're ordering to do, to make sure that they componentize this, so that if we don't have enough money to do it in a certain way, we decide that it's going to be X amount of feet, whatever that number is. Okay, you leave off electrical, we leave off this,
That's your.
I just don't see it makes sense to stop any, but I don't know how much you go to, like you said again, once that funding is thrown out there, we'll definitely know where they are. Pay that money down to how much you got done. You got 1/3 plans done, 50% plan done, that I don't know. So,
Yeah, and then I guess the other consideration too, and looking down the road, is you're looking to make a decision about, do you reduce scope or do you phase it? Put in the first 150 feet, with money that's available and wait for money down the road to continue out and tee it off or whatever. I mean, and we mentioned that with the amenities, you can easily phase amenities in.
well, that's, again, that's what we've been talking about. And again, that's with the public meetings and, how big, how short, what color. Those are the decisions we gotta have. We'll have another meeting certainly, and probably our best will be right after the funding is if it's awarded. We certainly want to schedule right then. Yeah, Mike?
Two questions. First one, if the money is shut down this year, what's plan B? If you don't get the funding this year, what's plan B?
What's plan B is at the time of that, we'll probably just have set plans that we can stop with. That's exactly where it'll be. We'll have a conceptual plan, we'll have a permit process, we'll have basically a shovel-ready project, except no money to do it with. Other than the 500,000 or so that's left from the original plan.
And then we do just.
And then the second question. Second question is really not a question, but a statement. Thank you for talking about no cost to the citizens. But that would really be nice to have sooner rather than later. At least some kind of projected cost for whatever amenities that your steering committee thinks that we want to provide, and what it would cost to put your boat there, get water, take care of the sewer, electrical, and whatever, so that we being the citizens of Ranier don't absorb that 5 years down the road.
Those are perfect questions for that steering committee. Check around and see what people charge for docking. See what and those are the questions that were asked. Some of the questions that were asked, because at the end of the day, this will be our dock. What kind of maintenance costs are involved for it? What kind of revenue can we generate from it to cover those costs? And so those are things that with phone calls and stuff like that, and that. But again, so much depends on this May decision. Otherwise, we have a project ready. We know what we can do with it, what it should look like. So, more meetings.
If they got another LCCMR grant next year, there's no reason why, because we've been applying, and Cheryl has been using the same grant that we did in 2019, or whenever we started this.
I don't
all
think
we've been doing is renewing it.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to forget about us, but again, it'll all be, how much they decide to give up. Right now, there's always that political pull on, how much they decide to fund, if they decide to fund any of it. So
We're also looking at the bonding bill too, right?
Well,
So we have two options for funding.
our backstop is the bonding bill. If it ain't funded through the LCMR, then the bonding, or if it's half funded through the LCMR, then the bonding bill may pick up the rest, or may pick up the whole tab. That, again, we don't know. So My suggestion is if this project has merit, but we want to make sure we design something that's acceptable to everybody, and then hopefully we have it ready, and when the money comes, we can just keep moving along.
Yeah.
And keep having them discussions, like you said, on costs and how maintenance costs and revenue stream and all that other stuff.
So one of the things that I would like to point out, because there's always social media stuff going around, and then there gets to be a lot of false information out there, and so, you know, we have to remember, you know, the council has to remember, let people know that the grants, what grants we are working off of, what grants we're after. And the other aspect of this project is the reason we decided to go with this bin wall construction with the concrete decking and everything. It could be up to 75 years before the city has to put any money into any repairs on that dock. And that was the #1 priority for me. I didn't want us to have to worry about like Ranier dock on the river. You know, it's like every 10 years we're trying to fix it, and I wanted this thing to be there and not be a thorn in our side on maintenance, and that is the best option. And I think, you know, 50 to 75 year life on a project is, where do you get that on anything else? No one ever thinks about that. But this committee has, so.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the question is always asked, can we afford it? And, you know, so again, what's it going to cost is the grant, but how much is it going to cost to keep it? That's the other question that should be asked. We should have answers for that. We should be working on those so that when we have our next meeting, you know, the grant will tell itself. You know what I'm saying? We got 200, we got 2 million, we got whatever. That number will come out from the state, and then we'll have to. But these other costs that we have to try to accumulate, and so we can answer those questions, and that's okay. Any other questions out there?
Can I get a recommendation?
What was that?
Sure. A recommendation? What am I supposed to tell the engineers?
I'll make a recommendation that we continue forward with the safe harbor project until we hear September, I guess. Keep going.
You mean in May?
I'll second.
We have a recommendation. You want to clarify the recommendations so I know
I would like to just make a recommendation.
Continue with the design.
Continue with the design of the project as planned.
Okay. That's the recommendation. We have a second. Just continue on with the design.
Design project. And the boring and everything just keeps on going. That way there we get the money, like you said, we got an open project that shows that it's ready to go.
Well, the recommendation is to continue on the work as planned so far. And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Okay, any other questions in the audience? Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Or any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
Is that a motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. Thank you.